So what is the number one human desire? I want you to really think about it. Is it a desire for wealth? Is it power? Or is it love? I think if we take a step back and we examine the real human condition, we see that what we want most is knowledge. Because knowledge and knowing more is to be more like God. And this goes back to the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, who willingly disobeyed God because they were tempted to know and be just like Him. And a lot of times, and in our generation, we seemingly believe we know better than God. We consider Him malicious when His will doesn't align with our own plans. We think we can outrun Him like Jonah attempted to, and we think we're above God. I think the worst thing we do is when we go as far as to undermine God's will when we say, why me? God, why did I lose my job? God, why am I depressed? Why do I feel rejected? Why do I feel isolated? Paul addresses this in Romans 9:19-21. He says, one of you will say to me, then why does God so blame us? For who is able to resist His will? But who are you, a mere human being, to talk back to God? Shall what is formed say to the one who formed it, why did you make me like this? Does not the potter have the same right to make out of the lump of clay some pottery for special purposes and some for common use? Guys, we live life by our feelings, and in turn we increase our own suffering. But why, God? Why me? We can look at Job, who was a faithful servant, someone who served God with his whole heart. He loved God with his whole heart. But he still had his riches taken from him, he had his family taken from him, and he had his health taken from him. And he asked God, why am I made to suffer? I've been so good to you. And I love the way God responds in Job chapter 38, verse 2. He says, who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? And not a knowledge that a human can have, because that is limited, and knowledge that only God can have, because He is sovereign and divine. And then he continues in verse 4, he says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? And he says in verse 12, have you ever given orders to the morning? There's a guy, Jonathan Edwards, from the 1700s. He was a Calvinist, and he wrote a sermon which I think is very important. It's called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And if there's 3 points I can use to sum up this sermon, it's that we are not strong enough to resist God, we have no power over Him, and His abundant righteousness makes Him the only one fit to judge our souls. And this is what Edwards had to say about the state of man and the power of God. He said, there is nothing between you and hell but the air. It is only the power and mere pleasure of God that holds you up. And if you think that's tough, I have 2 examples that I can give to you. King Solomon and Ernest Hemingway. Both men who respectively had it all, but he still knew that it wasn't enough. Ernest Hemingway writes in A Farewell to Arms, if people bring up so much courage to this world, the world has to kill them to break them. So of course it kills them. The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places. But those that it will not break, it kills. It kills the very good, and the very gentle, and the very brave impartially. If you are none of these, you can be sure it will kill you too. But there will be no special hurry. I know that's depressing, and I know it's tough, but it's biblical. King Solomon said himself that everything is meaningless. It's the Hebrew word havel. He says in Ecclesiastes 1:3-5, what do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun also rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. But why God? Why me? Solomon finishes with verse 18, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. And what I think he means is the more that we put our identity and believe that our capacity and capability to know sets our identity, the more that we suffer because we don't put our identity in God and understand that He is sovereign. When we think that we understand everything, we're lying to ourselves. Jonathan Edwards also wrestled with this revelation, but in the end he delighted in it because he knew that in God's sovereignty, Christ had opened the door of mercy, that even though damnation is deserved, salvation and peace are freely offered, because that is part of God's sovereign plan. And even though hurt and lies surround me, I know that the truth is in me, and the truth isn't my feelings or what I say is good and bad, but the truth's name is Jesus. And Jesus delights in interceding for us. He does it every day. He saw me on the cross. He saw me going through depression and feeling isolated and feeling rejected by everyone, but He still saw me. So instead of asking God, why me, make an attitude that asks God, who am I that you are mindful of me? Thank you.
Yeah.